Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is how I rebuild a mini bike. Let's get the controls out of the way. I already got the handlebars back on. We're going to need grips, brake lever, throttle, kill switch. On my other BT200X, I have similar bars. They're not quite the same as these. They don't have as much of a rake back or a sweep back towards the rider. I have them set up on risers so that they're about an inch higher than these. Where they sweep back, they're actually decently comfortable where they're at. I'll probably order some risers. One thing they are, though, is too wide. Sometimes people just put handlebars on things and they forget that it's metal tubing. That's it. It can be cut down so that your grippers aren't, a mile from center. There's 4 marks on the end on the left side. A little bit of knurling. I'm going to try to use a pipe cutter. I don't know if that knurling is going to be an issue or not. Last time I used an angle grinder where they're already on the bike. I don't want to be throwing metal flakes and stuff around. So I'm going to go about either the 3 or the 4. I think 4 is a full inch and 3 is 3/4. I don't need a bunch of switches or anything. That's a tough call. I got a nice straight cut, but boy, I'll tell you, did I have to work for it. I used my pipe cutter to etch a mark. I think you can see the one over here. Yep, there it is. 1 inch in from the end. Same as the other side. That's the tool I used. After my wrist got tired and my hand got sore, I resorted to the hacksaw. Even that took a while, but for me, it's better than having it not straight and trying to chase it with the file after you angle grind it wrong. I used my angle grinder and a flapper disc to take down the hard edge on the outside diameter of these handlebars to get that nice tapered inside diameter. I got up in there with the big honking drill bit. Just the tip. Barely. Honed it out a bit. And that's the finished product. Almost like it was meant to be. I'm almost 2 fingers away from the grip. I'm not sticking out past the end. It's comfortable. I guess I could come in just a little. Yeah, that's better. Still pretty close. I'm just looking at where it goes from smooth to, a different finish. I wouldn't say rough, matte maybe. Grips all the way on. Now I'll rig up the throttle. probably tighten that right there. I gotta figure out what's going on with the brake. I don't think it has. No, there's just no tension on it. Alright, so the throttle cable that came with this bike is junk. You see where the plastic's torn, the inner metal conduit showing, there's rust. That rust is probably on the inside as well. I don't think that cable is going to move very freely. No. All kinds of resistance there. It's not pretty. I'm going to get something else. It only has to make it from the linkage to the throttle housing. I have this tab that gets bolted on right there. And this neat little package of hardware. 2 of those little bolts. Well, 3 of them go to the starter. 2 are the stock ones, and 1 was because we only used the 2. Makes sense to me. We have a throttle cable guide and a clevis. Let me try to get that hooked up. And I'm also going to have to change up the brake line. Same business, just on the different end of the spectrum. One makes you go, one makes you stop. They're both no good. These drum brakes are just so simple. That's why I love them. Took me about, I don't know, 5 minutes to swap that out. Get some good tension. You got brakes now. That's how the tab bolts on to the front of this linkage. By process of elimination, we have 1 of these bolts left. We have 2 holes here and a 3rd one there. Just take out your 8mm bolt down there and replace it with this one. All right, that way they're all the same. Any type of maintenance you do on your starter or your throttle linkage will be done with the same wrench. Now we have to attach this fitting to that tab. The hole is threaded and it receives the same end that already has the nut on it. We're going to spin that off. There's a little olive piece on the inside. I'll do it over here so I don't lose it. Alright, so it's just like a little, I don't know, brass thing. It might be a guide for the cable, but it doesn't really work out so great. It's kind of a pain in the butt. I'm running my other one without it. It's working just fine. Thread that in. Once you get past the threads, you can't go any further. I'll back it off so you can see. Alright, you see where the threads stop and there's a blank spot. that's all the way on. Now we're going to attach that nut. And I'll grab a couple wrenches and lock that together. If you don't want to use the olive or this brass nut because you're concerned about the cable rubbing against that edge, it's sort of a bit tapered in that direction, so I really don't see it being an issue, but here you go. You find a nut, a regular nut, to replace it. If we look at the short end on this fitting, you can see how it's not sharp. It's kind of a rolled edge. We're going to try that one. So you can hang out with Olive, and you will go with the fitting onto the tab. There's how that comes out. Alright, so nice and flush, extremely smooth. I know that the other way works, so this is a new method that I'm trying. You know, we'll see what happens. Hopefully it doesn't back off and it doesn't get down to the brass nut being of a softer composition and that somehow locking the threads together when they're under tension with the brass threads. Just a thought. I overthink this stuff. I know I do, but it is what it is. I'm digging it. Now we need a cable. It's always awesome when you go to check out your cable selection and you find out you have the perfect length one already attached to an actual governor-less linkage. They sell these over at OMB Warehouse and they work really well. I've used them numerous times. So why am I doing this? I have a thing for repurposing stock parts and simple mechanical function. We didn't have to make a new rod, we just reused it. We have two stock springs. This is a factory linkage, stock carburetor. I'm running with that. I love this mechanical aspect so much. I have this on my other bike and it's very, very dependable. I have it set with an extra cable stop on the rod on the end here. I might add another one. I think I have a whole bag of them. Yeah, it's just these things. That just prevents that rod from coming out in case this moves. Well, anyways, I like it. And I also like to look at it. So by leaving the gas tank off of the engine, we'll be able to see it at all times on this one. At the same time I'm installing my throttle, I'm also going with my kill switch, and I rerouted my brake line so that everything goes together. I'll bunch those up and zip tie them once everybody has arrived to their destination. The reason I do that is to keep my cables out of the danger zone down here. If you come up on this side with your brake line, it crosses over and you can pinch it. Down here where the ground wire connects, or I should say it was connected. Looks like I have to put a new thing on the end of it. Well, it's going to go right here over that spring where that 8mm bolt is, and it'll clamp it on sort of like a washer. It took me 7, I think. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 zip ties to get everything where I wanted it. Now we have to loosen up this set screw to allow this rod to come back and pivot with this part of the linkage. We need this little hole to be somewhere over here. Alright, I took this little guy and I loosened up the screw on the clevis. That allows me to get the clevis onto the cable. It's loose. You can move. This screw is loose over here. So now when you pull the linkage, the rod comes free with it. There's a spring, so it's under constant tension. I'm going to attach this clevis to this throttle linkage using this clip. I'll then line everything up, pull the cable nice and snug, and then tighten the clevis. Here it is with the clevis attached to the linkage. The cable's still loose, so this can pull back through. Can go tight. Still loose over here. We're going to turn the linkage out and we'll pull that cable tight. I want to be right about there. Alright, I'll hold it and then tighten it with my wrench. Let me back that off just a little bit. I'm looking at how much rod I have coming out the end of that stop. Remember, I'm going to add an extra. So I'll set it right there. Perfect. That's not bad. You have to get, I think that's a spring creaking. I don't think it's that one. See, like, we're not full throttle and I'm on it. You have to give it a little extra something to go all the way. That might actually be a good thing. It's gonna be snappy. I have plenty on that end. I'm gonna loosen up the cable, loosen up this stop, and work this linkage back a little bit more. So we'll get shorter here, and this will come around a little bit more. Then I'll tighten it, and I'll add that extra stop on the end. Yeah, screw it. I just took a look at my other setup, and I have it rigged with a coat hanger. It's longer than this rod. It goes past by several inches, and then it has a loop. That loop keeps the extra stop from falling off the end. This one is held on by a clip to this throttle arm. So if this screw comes loose, then this stop itself can't fall down in the engine. Chances are the screw's not going to back all the way out before you catch it, because when it's just loose enough, the throttle will slip and you will have no response. It'll go full return. You shut the bike off, you come down and you say, hey, something's loose. And it's going to be that screw. All right. If I put that extra stop on here right now, I don't have enough to bend it up to prevent it from falling off if it loosened up. If that little stop loosened up, this whole thing would go down between the head, probably next to the spark plug. At that point, it'll be behind the sheet metal, and it could find its way back under here next to your flywheel while the engine's running. That wouldn't be good. You have a magnet. If the magnet catches that and then whacks that off the coil, it might just knock it back off, but it could do damage. So we'll avoid that, and we'll go with zero throttle response if that screw backs out. I still have to put a header and a gas tank on, but I think this linkage was the last real mechanical aspect. From here on out, things should really move along. While I'm down here, I'm going to go ahead and swap out the foot pegs. I have one for the other side too. I think I'm using bigger pins on these ones. Alright, I might have to bore out the holes with the drill. So I'll just yank both of them off for now and get these apart and see what I'm working with. Somehow both of the stock pegs survived, but the pins did not. That's crazy. I'm still going to replace them though. I had to bore them out all right. Just one drill bit. This side went on without a hitch. The other, well, it took a few layers of persuasion just to get it where it's at. It goes up. If something were to hit it, it'll self-clearance a little bit. So, send it. Pull the shirt off. Every time I drill something, I cover up the engine. Specifically if I have a port open. I'll pull the gasket off. Get my shop vac ready. I'll turn it on. Suck that bad boy out for what it's worth. Reinstall the gasket. and then my header. This is the OMB Warehouse left side exit header. I think they're for the ct.4 possibly EX. I have another one on my other BT200X. It fits like a glove. I did sort of a slash cut on this one. It was previously on a CT100. Like a glove. If I loosen up the axle and the engine and the jack shaft, I could scoot the engine forward, take the header with it, and increase the odds that a Mini 91 could fit on there. I'll try it like that first. I'll see if I have one. I can definitely move it forward if it doesn't clear and I want to add it in the future. So pretty sweet. I could paint that header, but we're not going to do that right now either. I usually wrap them. I just relocated my breather filter to a knife safe spot up under the seat. I have one zip tie holding it on the frame so I can't lose it. I could add another one down here, but I'm going to be upgrading the spark plug wire eventually, and I might just incorporate that as well. Now we're going to work on some custom fenders. These came off of my Coleman CT100U, but they're really CC100X front fenders, both of them. This is the bracket for the front of this bike. It was set up for a headlight. I'm not going to reuse that, so I'll go outside with my angle grinder and lop that off real quick. I put a little bit of black paint to it when I was done. You can barely even tell. I just left that square section. It's not worth the hassle of grinding all that off and having a mess of holes there. While that's drying, we're going to do the rear. I bent this tab straight down about that far, just so that I could get the arc of the fender somewhat close to it. I drilled a second hole next to the other hole that I had already drilled in the rear for the CT100, and then I just kind of slotted it. It's a little bit ugly right now. I might clean that up. What I have to do is get a bolt through the rear and then mark for the front. With my bolt going through, I have a washer and a nut on the bottom. I'm just about ready to close the gap in the rear. The front is still open. I don't want to bend these tabs too much and pop the welds, because then I got to take everything apart to fix it. So I'll probably end up using some sort of rubber spacers in between. I'm going to hold it as close to the center as I can. It's hard to get that vent line out of your way. And I'll mark the hole. I'll just drill it out. I do believe these two will get it. One of them is wider and slightly thicker. You're not really going to see them under the tab. I can center that one that's a little big on the inside diameter. The little bit of offset in the thickness actually helps. I think I had this one in the front and the little one in the rear. Yeah, buddy. That has a nice bobbed look to it. The other fender, the green one, didn't come down that much further in the rear. So I'm going for looks here. It's still going to provide some protection. The bracket for the front fender is extremely close to a set of holes that I already drilled. The one in the rear is directly in the middle of that molded raised portion. I'm going to leave that one as a hole, and then I'm going to slot the front. If I line up the rear, you can see I'm just ahead in the front. I'm also going to take the bend out on this tongue. Well, I guess I'm increasing. Yeah, I'm increasing the bend. I'm going to add more this way. And then I'll just use two of the same rubber grommets. I have the bracket mounted. You can see my bend job I did. I just threw it in the vise and whacked it with the hammer. You got to put the bracket on before the fender. It's just easier that way. I saw another one on Facebook where the guy used doodlebug fenders and 20-inch tires. They look pretty cool. They were black like this. So I'm pretty excited to see how it turns out. I could have gone slightly longer on these bolts. My threads are just barely coming through. I'm going to leave them for now. Just like everything else on this bike. If it holds together, then I'm just going to leave it. If it doesn't, then I'll repair it as I go. I kind of like the rear better than the front. I guess I could have bent it down a little bit more. It's not the worst thing I've seen. Spinning the bracket doesn't help. I would have to bend the front down and the rear up. We can definitely do a little bit better than this. We have the clearance back here. Alright. And take it off and do some bending. This time I just did the bending right in place. I didn't pull it out. Might look a little haggard, but once everything's installed, I don't think you'll notice it. Shock and awe, shock and awe. That's a lot better. It's still up a little bit in the front. It's not exactly parallel to the tire, but that kind of gives it that playful dirt bikey vibe. Everyone loves that. Yeah, buddy. That's what's up. As promised, I also fixed the hardware. I'm still using the same size nuts and bolts as I am in the rear. This is going to look killer. The last thing we need before we ride this mini bike is a gas tank. I just cut off a piece of foam from an interlocking floor tile. I think I got them at Harbor Freight, like a pack of 6. They were wicked cheap. Just about half-inch, somewhat dense foam. I've dumped gas and oil on these before. They didn't light on fire or start smoking or anything. So I think they're going to be alright for this application. We're going to use this to keep our gas tank from vibrating against the frame. We're leaving the stock tank off for now. Let's find out how she does, and then we'll move forward from there. So this might be temporary. It might be temporarily permanent. I'm going to place this over the frame, and then I'll trace it with a permanent marker. I couldn't find a permanent marker, so I used a pencil. There's enough of an imprint there. I can see it. I'm going to cut that out with a pair of scissors. This pad is going to provide plenty of protection from our 3x spun aluminum gas tank vibrating against it. I know this isn't going to get me the greatest run time, maybe 15-20 minutes, but I really don't plan on leaving the yard with this anyway. I tried to find the center already. I'm going to bring the tank back against the front of the seat. Probably going to cut that short. See, we're just about in the middle. Right on that pucker mark. I'm going to put a piece of wood under this and drill that out so that the fuel bung can pass through. I use kind of a small drill bit, so I'm just working the edges and pulling it out a little. Give that a shot. Put this over the frame, and then the bung goes in the hole. It's a bung hole. Okay. There it is. We gotta cut this short. I'm going to just go slightly in front of the tank. I was going to go flush, but I'll go like an 1/8 inch, maybe a 1/4. While we're here, we might as well go ahead and open up that bung hole a little bit more. I saw it was getting hung up on this part here. It's not much, maybe. Alright, so it's like 3 times the size that it was. I'm going to try to hold it and then use the edge of the drill bit to just carve it out. That looks better. Well, we're going to put it right over the frame rails, and when you push down, it sort of hugs it. Now, I don't have any ring clamps that are big enough for this, but I do have something else. A couple pieces of high quality heater hose and two approximately 36 and a ½ inch long 175-pound zip ties. We call them cable ties because they're extra heavy duty. These are going to be plenty strong. The rubber hose is going to provide more friction than just the hard plastic of the zip tie itself against the aluminum body of the honey pot. So I'll loop these through the hoses, or the sections of hose. Those will go over the tank, and then I'll draw my ties somewhere underneath. It ain't loose, I'll tell you that much. I just have the two zip ties pulled tight, and I'm thinking about adding something else across the bottom here just to draw them together so they can't separate. I don't want to get in the way of the bung though. Maybe I'll run the fuel line first and then I'll think about that. I'll leave the tails on until then. Now this is what I call live and direct. I added an extra shutoff valve directly in line with the tank before the filter. That way, if there's any mishaps, we have to do any type of repair, we can shut the main off when we're riding it, and shutting the bike off, we'll use the one on the carburetor. If you just use that one and you ignore the fact that you have all of this fuel in the line when you shut it off, then that's going to want to make its way through the carburetor bowl. So that's our primary, and that's our emergency. Even though these are slightly smaller, it's still not your average zip tie. They're claiming 180 pounds on these ones. I just took two of those, one on each side of the bung, and I lashed the big berthas together. It might not be the most appealing thing, but you're really not going to see it under there. What's important here is that it's super easy to replace and repair on the fly. A little bit of fresh gas in the tank. I made sure that the main emergency maintenance override was turned off. I'm going to turn that on. And then I'm going to turn this one on. Here comes the gas. It's going into the filter, down the line, and into the carburetor. I'll feel and look for drips. When I'm satisfied that nothing's coming out, I'll attempt to start it. So far, so good. there is absolutely no reason this should not start. I've done this enough times. You might need the choke. Turn the choke off. Again. Hang in there. We're almost to the fun part. I'm going to complete my braking cycle on this engine and then change the oil one more time. After that, we're going for a test ride. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. I want you to stay, I want you to stay.